So we have moved very far from the wisdom of the rishis. We have not used it. And what has happened today is that the world is divided between people who have sewerage and conventional toilets and people who don't have anything, no sanitation at all. If the engineers had devised a set of best practices from the Vedic strictures of not mixing human waste with clean water, not sending wastewater to freshwater bodies, and ensuring that nutrients are properly recycled, then we would have had a cleaner, healthier and livable world today. We need to reconnect with Indic knowledge to know the wisdom of our seers and see how that can be applied today to solve today's problems. Namaste and welcome to my talk. It's very nice to see some turnout on a Sunday evening. So I'd first like to start by thanking Srijan Foundation, especially Rahul Diwan, for giving me a second opportunity to present my thoughts. I think Srijan Foundation is doing a fabulous job of helping us to decolonize ourselves, and my presentation is also a step in that direction. So we all know about India's sanitation problem. We know about the sewage flowing into the rivers. We know about open defecation. But I'm going to go a little deeper into the problem. What is the problem and why it was caused? Now, before I start, I want to tell you about the flush toilets. This is the word that I've used is a sarcastic word, and a lot of problems come from this. It starts from here. So with one press of the flush handle, which uses about 10 to 20 liters of clean water, you are able to send out your waste, the waste that you produce, and it goes out of sight, it vanishes, you don't know where it went, and I don't think you want to know where it went, because if you did, you would be horrified. So typically, if there is a proper infrastructure, when you flush, the solids and the liquids should go to a wastewater treatment plant. And don't get too worried about this big complicated diagram, but I just want to tell you how many processes are involved. So the wastewater from the toilet goes for screening when the larger sized solids are removed, screened. Then it goes to sedimentation where the smaller sized solid particles are removed. Then it goes to the next stage, the secondary treatment, where bacteria is used to remove the dissolved organic matter in the wastewater. So you see, we have used clean water to remove the dirt or the waste. And as you know, even a small amount of impurity in water can pollute it, right? And here we are taking our solids and then using clean water to remove it. And then all these processes are trying to remove the solids and produce clean water out of it. So you see what's happening here. We are now trying to separate two things which shouldn't have been mixed in the first place. And then after that, we are trying to produce clean water. And then when the solids come out, they are wet. And then we use a huge amount of energy trying to dry it, removing the moisture from it. So all this comes from that flush toilet that we saw in the beginning, which causes all the problems. It's a flawed paradigm. So to lay a sewer, it takes a huge amount of money. There is, you have a lot of inconvenience because roads have to be dug up and you install the sewer lines. And then you already saw that large amounts of energy are needed to separate solids from water. Why were they mixed in the first place? So cities are struggling to find the finance to build sewers and sewage treatment plants. And that's the reason why you find that most of India is not covered by a sewerage system and people don't really have a sanitation system. So most of the sewage is going, once water is supplied to a house or a commercial establishment, they are going to produce wastewater. When you use water, that's the wastewater. And then if there is no treatment plant, it ends up in water bodies or it goes into the land, and that's how it is lying there, and then that causes diseases, as you know. The other problem is nutrient recovery, which I'm going to talk about later. So there is a sanitation crisis, not just in India, but the whole world. About 80% of sewage produced today in the world is not being treated. And so we have wastewater coming from homes, commercial establishments, industries, farmlands, which are flowing into rivers, seas, and there's no proper treatment. Sometimes it's just one level of treatment where they just remove some solids, that's it, and the rest goes into the water bodies. So fecal, sludge and solid waste are finding their way into the food chain, which should not be a surprise to you, right? Because all that, once you let it go into rivers and then seas, then it's going to affect your food, right? This is having a serious impact on human health, education and economy. So children who are suffering from diarrhea after consuming polluted water, obviously they can't go to school, they cannot complete their education, they do not get their grow to their full height or weight. So there's a lot of malnutrition also caused by the poor quality of water. This is a picture of sewage going into Haridwar, the Ganga between Haridwar and Kanpur. Of course, nowadays because of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, a lot of cleaning has been done, but don't be fooled. I mean, the problem still exists because there are many, many rivers in India, and just cleaning one stretch is good for optics, but it's not really solving the problem. And I also hasten to add that this is not a problem only in India. Here is a picture of what happened in Virginia, where sewage, in most of the developed countries, they have a combined sewer system where not only sewage, but rainwater also gets into the sewer. So if there's very heavy rain, right, then there is an overflow. The treatment plants cannot handle so much of wastewater, and then that goes into the water bodies. So this happened in 2017 in America. So it happens in many parts of the world because of the flawed paradigm, the flawed system that we have. Now let me tell you about the nutrients. As you know, we get our nutrients from food, and food gets it comes from plants. And so when we consume food, not all the nutrients will be absorbed by the body. A great portion of it is excreted. In fact, most of it is excreted because it cannot be used. And so it is excreted via urine. So the urine contains nitrogen, potassium, it contains phosphorus. There are very rare instances of these nutrients being recovered from the urine and then used as fertilizers in agriculture. So one of the biggest expenses that countries have is fertilizers. Fertilizers are imported by India. 90% of phosphate fertilizers are imported by India. US imports 85% of potash and 50% of its nitrogen fertilizers. So what's happening is humans are going through this whole process of mining. So we are mining all these elements, or this what you call the fertilizers, to produce fertilizers for the crops. We are mining them, and then when we have our food, then it's lost and it goes into the rivers and seas. So it's a linear way of losing the nutrients. We are not making it circular and putting it back into the agriculture. So we will always keep mining for more and more of fertilizers, right? So lakes and streams which receive an excess of nutrients are suffering from oxygen depletion. Fish kills. So when it goes into rivers or lakes, you will find algal blooms. That's because of the wastewater carrying all the nutrients going into lakes and reservoirs. You'll find all the green algal blooms, water hyacinth, and that causes the fish to die in the rivers because it takes up all the oxygen. So it's killing aquatic life. And then the other problem is the synthetic fertilizer manufacturing. It also is a very polluting industry. And now with a growing population, more and more people need food. So fertilizer factories are going to expand, right? And then we are not bringing back those nutrients. So they'll always be getting lost in the system. So now I go back to the Indic understanding of hygiene and environmental protection. So the ancient Indians not only knew about general hygiene in terms of washing hands, bathing, but also sexual hygiene. They were very, very well versed with it. And they knew that disease-causing pathogens need to be isolated from settlements. They should not be near places where people live, eat, or they should not get into water. This was very well understood in ancient India. Under no circumstances are human waste, blood, or hazardous substances to be allowed to contaminate water. This was very well understood in ancient India. So hygiene, disease prevention, environmental protection, and the need to recycle nutrients in human waste. All these aspects were very clearly understood by our ancient sages and even the population. So if you go and look at the Indic texts such as Sushruta Samhita, Charaka Samhita, Manusmriti, Vayu Purana, Vastu Shastra, Kama Sutra, Artha Shastra, all of them have principles which we could have used to extract global best practices on having a healthy natural ecosystem, which we have not been aware of it at all. So just look at this. I want to give you the proof about how much knowledge we had about pollution. So Charaka Samhita says in the 27th chapter, The river having water polluted with soil and feces, insects, snakes and rats and carrying rainwater will aggravate all doshas. Slimy having insects, impure, full of leaves, moss and mud, having abnormal color and taste, viscous and foul smelling water is not wholesome. So, this is, Charaka Samhita is very ancient, about 4th century BC is what it is said to be, said to have been written in, but it might be much older. And already they are talking about how rivers can get polluted with all these animals and how you should not be consuming this water, right? Now, the much reviled Manusmriti, you only hear negative things about it, but look at what it says about hygiene. I'm not reading the Sanskrit part. Let him not throw urine or feces into the water, nor saliva, nor clothes defiled by impure substances, nor any other impurity, nor blood, nor poisonous things. There's one more. It says, far from his dwelling let him remove urine and ordure. Ordure means excreta. Far let him remove the water used for washing his feet, and far the remnants of food and the water from his bath. See, so all this goes to say that we had a total understanding of what constitutes impurities and what should not be a part of our food or water, right? And I'll tell you why we need to know all this, right? So, we knew, the Manusmriti talks about what are the impure substances. This is one of the most ancient texts which is laying out what are the impure substances, that if you touch them, you need to wash your hands, you need to clean yourself. Semen, blood, urine, feces, nasal mucus, ear wax, phlegm, tears, sweat. So just imagine, they knew that all these substances, you can't just touch them and then go and have your food. You can't touch them and rub them over your body. And you'll be surprised to know that this was not known to other parts of the world outside greater India. It looks like this is so obvious, right? In 21st century, we all know that these things, when we touch any of these things, we need to wash. But it was not known in other parts of the world, okay? So what does it tell you about our civilization, right? Now, why did the Vedic people are often, this open defecation problem goes back to that time, and it has a lot of negative publicity, open defecation. So why did the Vedic people go and do their job outside, right? Were they foolish? Were they stupid? Well, they were not. The thing is, they knew that if they do their job closer to where they are living, then it's going to cause flies coming in, and the pathogens can get into their food. So that's the reason they went very far. And in those days, there were plenty of isolated places, right? Population was not like what it is today. So when people went to the fields, beyond the fields, they would always find a place where there was nobody, where there were no other houses, and that's where they defecated. And they made sure they didn't go near the rivers, because they knew that water would be taken from rivers or wells. So they would go to a far off place. And after defecation, and they would not just do it anywhere, they would make a little bit of a pit and do it there. Then they would cover it with sand, right? So that they knew that flies should not be sitting on it. They used to cover it up, not just leave it like that. And the left hand would be used for anal washing. They would carry a little bit of water with them for anal washing. And after that, that left hand would be washed with natural soaps, right? And that hand would not be used for eating as a precaution, even though they washed it with soap. They made sure that they wouldn't use that hand for eating. And that is something which is made fun of. I've heard this from many people. But today, of course, we still have that habit. Many of us have still the same habit, which has come from ancient times. As the population started increasing, there came a time when there was no far away, right? You could go far, but then you would be close to another habitation, right? So that is the time when open defecation should have stopped. We should have, if we had enlightened leadership. So actually, right until the 20th century, it was not so bad. People could still find a far off place, and it was safe. But then when it became unsustainable, when the population increased, the density increased, and especially near the cities, that was the time we should have transitioned into eco-san toilets, that is ecological sanitation toilets with decentralized sanitation, which used to be practiced in the Sindhu Saraswati civilization once upon a time. That is what we should have transitioned into, but that didn't happen. Now, what I told you now was about the rural sanitation systems. But the cities, they had a different system. So they had latrines and sewerage, which, as you have seen in Harappa, they had open sewers. I mean, they were closed also. They were closed sewers, which carried away the wastewater. But remember, in those days, it was not a huge amount of wastewater. Only a small amount of water would be used for washing, and then that would flow. Okay. And in the Sindhu Saraswati, people were the earliest to use latrines, soak pits, cesspools, pipes, and channels for wastewater disposal. So some toilets were just holes in the ground, and some others had seats, right? And then the effluents were collected in pits which were lined with clay bricks, and in those which had centralized system, so that it would be allowed to settle, and then the top level of the settled wastewater would flow to a bigger drain, and then the solids would be recovered, and then they would be used for agriculture. This is a picture of the main drain at Lothal. So terracotta pipes, brick-lined soak pits have been found not just in the Sindhu Saraswati sites, but also in Takshashila, Delhi, Ujjain and Arikamedu. Typically, we think it's only in the Harappan sites that we have found these. So further excavations might reveal more ancient towns with well-developed wastewater management systems. So that is something that has to be looked into. And then there is Arikamedu, which is special. It is in the southern part of India, and it was a center for textile production, and there they found industrial wastewater treatment systems as well. So that was something different, because they used to do business with Rome. A lot of textile export was done to Rome, and they had industrial wastewater systems as well. Now, there is a lot of reporting on open defecation, which projects that Hindu texts are responsible for the open defecation problem. So if this article appeared in New York Times, and it said that open defecation has been long been an issue in India, some ancient Hindu texts advise people to relieve themselves far from home, a practice that Gandhi sought to curb. So you can see the negative spin given here. There is no indication that open defecation was actually a healthy practice once upon a time, and then the Vedic books which asked you to do them, they had a reason for that. That has not been discussed at all, and it makes it seem like here are a bunch of duffers who go and do open defecation, which is written in their text, and that is they are polluting their own waters. That is the kind of narrative which has been built up, and even we Indians themselves have swallowed it. This movie called Toilet Ek Prem Katha also showed a lot of negative things about, I remember scenes where there is a Brahmin. They made it seem like, Brahmins and Hindus don't want toilets. They don't want toilets. They want to go and pollute the countryside, the fields. That's what they want to do. And you have to fight against them and then get toilets built, which is totally wrong. It was, in fact, the Hindus themselves who had laid out why you have to go so far and defecate, so that you don't want to pollute your living places and your water. So that doesn't come out at all, and then they are shown, Hindus are shown as very backward people who don't know what cleanliness is, don't know what hygiene is, and they don't want toilets in their houses. So they should have set right the narrative, but that is also not happening. Now let me tell you something interesting about Europe. We talk a lot about India, but we don't know much about how the Europeans lived, what kind of sanitation they had, right? So the miasma theory of disease prevailed for a long time until the germ theory of disease came. That was in the 1800s, late 1800s. So the miasma theory believes that you get sick because of bad smells. Okay, so if you are living in a place which has a bad smell, that's what causes you to get cholera, typhoid disease, any kind of disease, right? So noxious form of bad air. So in those days, when the water closet meaning the flush toilet, it was called water closet because in those days the toilet used to be in a closet. So people would go, it was like a cupboard. Go inside, do your job, and it was like a cupboard in the house. So they were, when it was first introduced in London, people were so happy because they said now is a way we can get rid of the foul smell which comes after defecation, and that smell will be taken away from our houses, and that's going to improve our health. They didn't know the connection between where it goes and what kind of disease, the pollution it might cause. They didn't know that, and this was in the 18th century. So excreta was disliked only for its smell, not for its potential to cause disease. So they thought the more it was dumped in the Thames, the better it was. It was safer for the residents. The connection between polluted water and disease was not made by Europeans until the 1880s. Can you believe that? So if we are talking about ancient texts of 4th century BCE making that connection, but you don't see it even in the 19th century. So London Sewer Commissioners proudly noted the huge volume of human waste that the city's toilets were depositing into the river, and they gave the numbers: 29,000 cubic yards in the spring of 1848 and 80,000 cubic yards by the winter of 1849 has been deposited in the Thames River. That was an achievement. So the Times reported in 1858 that death rates had declined because the Thames had grown fouler. There was total ignorance about the fact that when the tide in the North Sea rises, the filth will go all into the drinking water inlet, and that is going to cause problems. They didn't think about it. Many cholera epidemics took place and many people died. It was very late by the time they made the connection. And this is from a book written by Sonia Shah, where she says, nevertheless, under the powerful influence of miasmatism, when cholera struck, Londoners believed it was not because too many flush toilets dumped human waste into the river, but because too few did. Flush toilet sales in the years after 1832 epidemic enjoyed rapid and remarkable growth. So more people installed flush toilets when the cholera epidemic broke, because they said that, oh, it's because we don't have a toilet yet. That's why this happened. And so flush toilet sales enjoyed another spike after the 1848 outbreak of cholera. So many Londoners installed flush toilets over the 1850s that the city's water use doubled between 1850 and 1856. Now I'll tell you about the European caste system. We all talk a lot about Indian caste system. Let's learn about the European caste system. What you see in the picture are those people who used to go in the dead of the night. They would go into the rich neighborhoods. They would go into the toilets and then empty the cesspit and take out all the pieces, put it in that drum and carry it with them. And later on, of course, they had motorized versions also. And then they would take it to the limits of the city and put it there. Either they would throw it in the river or do something with it. But the point is that these people who did this job were not allowed to live in the city. They had to live outside the city, and only in the night when everybody was sleeping, they were allowed to come in, and they were supposed to make some noise and then come in. And that's why they were called nightmen, and they were called gong fermeurs in French. There are many names for them. So this is your European caste system. Those people were not allowed to mix with the other people. So the point is that until the technology, the technology interventions were made and all this could be done automatically, not by people, that is when their caste system was eliminated. Until then, when they had to do it manually, it was considered a very bad profession and those people were kept away from the other people. Just to give you some perspective. Now the question comes, what if Indians had stayed connected with ancient knowledge? So here is a bit of guesswork and hypothesis that we can make, that they might have naturally gravitated towards eco-san or composting toilets because they already knew that they should not put their waste into water. So they would probably have developed toilets which are self-composting, which can be converted to fertilizer, or maybe they would have talked about producing energy from the waste, right? I am quite sure that they would not have developed a system which sends wastewater from toilet to rivers as sacred as Saraswati or Ganga. It's just not possible. We couldn't have developed this kind of a system. So I would say that if the engineers had devised a set of best practices from the Vedic strictures of not mixing human waste with clean water, not sending wastewater to freshwater bodies, and ensuring that nutrients are properly recycled, then we would have had a cleaner, healthier and livable world today. The Vedic best practices, that's what we missed. So today, it's not that people don't know about eco-san toilets. In many villages, in many small towns, they are building eco-san toilets which do not use water, too much of water. They produce fertilizer right there. It is kept for a period of time until it decomposes, and then the waste is taken and put in the fields. So it is there. And there are champions of eco-san toilets who are quite famous. So there is a talk about sanitation being turned into a virtuous sustainability business. So you can make money out of feces. That kind of concept is very much there, but that is actually coming from the West. It is not so much from here. Now in 2011, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they announced the Reinvent the Toilet Challenge. So that was quite revolutionary, because then Bill Gates, like what he had done with computers, right? To how computers were available in every house. Once upon a time, nobody thought that everybody would have a computer. So he said, I want to do something like that with toilets, right? And so he asked designers to come up with a toilet which is cheap, which is costs less than $1 a day, so that it's affordable, and also it can produce fertilizers, and it won't pollute the environment. So this challenge was started by Gates, And in fact, he made a big statement last year in the Reinvented Toilet Summit in Beijing. He took a jar of feces with him to the stage, and he caused quite a commotion. But he wanted to make a statement that, this is a problem. We have a sanitation problem, and we can solve it by generating something out of this of the feces. You can generate fertilizers, and you can make it a virtuous business. That's the statement he wanted to make. So the Gates Foundation, over 7 years, they poured a lot of money, millions of dollars. They got innovators together. They got all kinds of engineers, technicians. So, and then they developed the Omni processor. So he announced it in that summit last year, and he said this processor takes in human waste, kills dangerous pathogens, and converts the materials into clean water, electricity, and fertilizer. So, and he says that we can have toilets fitted with this, retrofitted. It's a question of scaling it up. So the concept is there. It just took him 7 years with the help of engineers, scientists, companies, and universities. And if you look at it, it's actually an Indic concept that he has used. Something that should have, if we were aware, if we were connected with our past and knew what our ancients were doing, we should have come up with this. But now this has been brought up by the Gates Foundation. So I give you some concluding thoughts. So we have moved very far from the wisdom of the rishis. We have not used it. But what has happened today is that the world is divided between people who have sewerage and conventional toilets and people who don't have anything, no sanitation at all, right? So, but there is we cannot do much about those cities which already have a sewerage system and the conventional toilets. It's difficult to uproot them and get the sustainable systems. So they are going to do what they are doing. But in the other places where there are no toilets, where there's no sanitation, there is a window of opportunity, and we can actually build toilets which are sustainable. We can connect to our past, our Indic knowledge, and build healthy and eco-friendly toilets. So my message to all of you is that we need to reconnect with Indic knowledge to know the wisdom of our seers and see how that can be applied today to solve today's problems. So with this, I come to an end. Thank you, everybody.